good. Jamel Herring beats Jonathan Oquendo after the 8th round by disqualification. Throughout the fight, Oquendo was coming forward with his head, frankly. And Herring being the southpaw that he is, we know that there tends to be a lot of headbutts. There was a couple headbutts, maybe in the first couple rounds, but in the 3rd round, I thought, okay, Herring got his distance. He was jabbing a lot more, landing straight lefts to the body, straight lefts to the head, and then he landed a left uppercut that dropped Oquendo. I was like, okay, this is what Herring has to do. This is what he's going to do throughout the whole fight. But then he started tying up Oquendo more when he was coming. He was letting him come in more. And Oquendo in the 5th round was able to land, not a punch, but a headbutt that cut Herring in the eye. And Tony Weeks, this is very important, ruled it an intentional headbutt and took a point from Oquendo. So Herring was okay with the cut for 3 more rounds. It was an ugly fight. Oquendo was pushing forward. Herring was having a very hard time keeping the distance, but when it got close, sometimes Oquendo would rub his head against Herring's head, maybe rub the cut a little bit with his head, but for the most part, Herring was trying to keep his distance and succeeding, but when he wasn't able to succeed, he was tying up. So Oquendo wasn't very effective, and neither was Herring, but he was landing more punches throughout. From the 5th to the 8th round, he was landing more punches. After the 8th round, there was more blood trickling from that cut above Herring's eye. And in his corner, when he got to his corner, he shook his head like that. And I thought, fighters don't shake their head when walking to the corner unless they don't want to fight anymore. So the doctor asked him, Are you alright? Of the like, I'm paraphrasing, of course. And Herring goes, I can't see. So the corner asked him, like, what do you want to do? And then the corner asked Tony Weeks, so what could we do? And Tony Weeks like, hey, I can't tell you what happens, but I ruled it an intentional headbutt. So I can't tell you what to do. I can't tell you what happens, but I ruled it an intentional headbutt. So that should give you an idea of an outcome. So they're debating amongst themselves whether they should quit. They're debating because really that cut was bad, but it wasn't that bad for the doctor to stop it immediately. It wasn't Diego Corrales against Joel Casamayor, where blood was spitting from his lips and Corrales was begging the referee to let it continue, was begging the doctor to let it continue. This was Herring looking at the referee, looking at his corner, looking at the doctor, and saying, I can't see. What could we do? Looking if he would still win this fight, because he had put enough rounds in the bank where he would win this fight if it would go to the scorecards. So, Tony Weeks didn't tell him exactly, but he said, hey, I ruled it an intentional headbutt. And they said, all right, yeah, he can't see, we can't continue. Tony Weeks goes, nope, puts his arms up, says, no, okay, it's over. Rules it a disqualification because it was an intentional headbutt. Had it been an unintentional headbutt, it would have gone to the scorecards. Now, this was new to me. I guess the rules say intentional and unintentional headbutts are different, and yeah, they can. Most headbutts are intentional. What's funny is that Andre Ward and Timothy Bradley were talking about headbutts, and I thought, yep, how appropriate. Both of these guys were masters of headbutts and dirty tactics and stretching the rules. And had most of their fights been ruled, had most of their fouls been ruled intentional like they were, like most fighters' fouls are and headbutts are, maybe they would have been disqualified. Perhaps. But I can tell you what, my favorite fighter of the last decade, Salido, would have got disqualified or would have lost by disqualification to Mikey Garcia instead of by decision. Because that was clearly an intentional headbutt. Whether you could tell me that tomorrow and I will argue against it, that's another story. But there's my mandatory Salido reference. But there's the rules. There's the rule. If it's an intentional headbutt, it's ruled a disqualification. It doesn't go to the scorecards. Even if it was 3 rounds before and he was still able to fight, and even though they took that point away from Oquendo, the rule says if the cut is ruled from an intentional headbutt and the fight is stopped from that cut, then it does not go to the scorecards. Then okay, I understand from the standpoint of the rules. But now, with Timothy Bradley and Andre Ward, I do respect them as commentators and as fighters. But tonight, we're talking about them as commentators. They were questioning Jamel Herring as a fighter. And they said, man, we can't just only praise fighters for stepping into the ring and being brave and performing great. We can't only praise fighters. We gotta criticize them when they do something that isn't champion-like, that a fighter shouldn't do. No one brought up stopping the fight until Herring himself said he couldn't see. Not the doctor. The doctor wasn't threatening to stop the fight, and Herring wasn't pushing to continue. No, that was never a question until Herring said, I can't see. That's a fighter wanting a way out. He found it, he sought it, he got it. Just like Mikey Garcia against Lorenzo Salido, he might have had a broken nose. I'm not arguing that, but he didn't want to continue. Herring didn't want to continue, and as Andre Ward said, he did not act like a fighter. And far from me sitting on my chair, saying someone didn't act with valor, especially an ex-Marine like Herring, a man from the armed forces, didn't act with valor, stepping inside of a ring. But Andre Ward said this himself. He did not act like a fighter. And we can't put that stupid... Let's throw that stupid argument out the window. Oh, people argue, criticize fighters without ever stepping into the ring. First off, I've stepped into boxing ring many times, got my butt handed to me dozens of times. I could tell you that right now. So that's not an argument you can make with me. 2, that's a stupid argument because we criticize everything. We criticize movies. I watched a couple movies earlier today. One sucked. One was very good. I'm not a filmmaker. I'm not a director. I'm not an actor. But you could criticize actors, directors, movie makers. So we could criticize fighters for not performing as we deem them appropriate. This was not appropriate for a champion to want a way out like this. This was not appropriate. This wasn't Mike Alvarado after being dropped 4 times by Ruslan Provodnikov, being asked, and then just a shameful from himself. You could feel the self-shame that came from quitting, which is corner should have stopped the fight so he didn't have to quit. Now, I know I'm bringing up a lot of stuff, but this is important. Alvarado didn't want to quit, and the corner wanted to stop it, but the referee needed to ask him for some reason if he wanted the fight to stop, and he said very shamefully, yes. I could say Alvarado had nothing to be ashamed of in that fight. Herring, I'm not going to say he should be ashamed of himself, but I will agree with Tim Bradley, with Andre Ward, that he did not act like a fighter. And I will say that I think he beats Frampton. And it's weird, like they're championing that fight as a super fight or something that the fans are begging to watch. Because we're not. The last fight I've wanted to see Frampton in was against Leo Santa Cruz, and I don't even remember what year that was. That's at least 3 years ago. It has to be. But Burchell would have beat him. Would have probably beat him up in tonight. I think even Oscar Valdez would beat him. Speaking of cuts, Jojo Diaz in that first fight with Farmer, that cut was way worse. Excuse me, it was way worse than this cut Herring had against Oquendo. So to say that he couldn't continue is not true. Canelo had a worse cut against Mosley, and he was like 20 years old in that fight, testing the waters against world-class opposition. So, man, Herring could have continued, and really, he's the weakest of the champions at 130, and I think all the other champions beat him. Maybe even handily. I think Burchell would beat him handily. I think Tank Davis would beat him handily. I think Oscar Valdez is a good fight, but I think Valdez would beat him as well. So I don't know if it's this whole quarantine, the layoffs, the multiple camps that is affecting other people's performance, but this wasn't a very good performance. It looked like it was gonna be, but then he let the pressure from Oquendo, him coming forward, the pressure from his cut, he let that get to him. And he let that get to him to the point where he didn't act like a fighter. So, I mean, congratulations getting home with the victory tonight. It was not an easy fight, and he found a way. But Andre Ward said, if someone keeps headbutting you, make them stop. He didn't say headbutt them back or low blow them, but make them stop. Find a way to make them stop. He did not do that tonight. And I don't know. I think he beats Frampton, but we'll see. I can't even say I look forward to watching Herring fight again, but I'll watch him. I'll watch him against the other champions, but I don't think he'll be champion for much longer. Thanks everybody for watching. Peace.